Thanks for attending the club lunch. The goal is to bring all Democrats from the most conservative to the most progressive to celebrate our shared values and appreciate who we are and work together to put more Democrats in office. I would like to acknowledge our sponsor, Albrechta and Albrechta Law Firm. They've been supporting this lunch for several years. If you need legal help, please think about Albrechta and Albrechta. And I'll put their link in the chat in a minute. Our speaker today is Grant Wilson. He's the executive director of Earth Law Center here in Durango. That is the global headquarters of this organization. They're building a grassroots movement from the ground up, and I put the rest in the chat. Everyone is asked to stay muted except for the speaker and myself. And then Kirby will be helping with questions, but he'll be muted. If you want to submit a question different from ones we are asking, please use the chat feature on Zoom. There's so few of us, we might just jump in and talk. So if you want to put a bunch of questions, put them in the Zoom. How about that? If you're having trouble with internet, you may want to disable your video, and audio only works better on slower connections. This Zoom meeting is being recorded and will be available within a day or so for viewing on our YouTube channel. You just put La Plata Democrats in the YouTube search bar. Let's see, I would like to encourage everyone to donate to the La Plata County Dems in this important election year, which helps keep our office rented, and we can accumulate funds ahead of the need. Monthly donations are particularly appreciated, and you can set those up on ActBlue. This is our 5th club lunch for 2024. The next ones will probably be related to candidate forums and stuff like that as we get close to the election, but we haven't got confirmation yet on the June one. So if you have any announcements to make, enter something in the chat and we'll recognize that at the end. Grant just asked, remind him how long he should talk for. I would say we have an hour for everything. You know, we run from 12 to 1:30 and we do get a late start. So, you know, half hour or 20 minutes and then maybe 20 minutes and Q&A. So introducing Grant Wilson. He's an expert on the rights of nature, ecocentric law, and international environmental law. For the last decade, he has defended the rights and interests of nature all over the world, including co-drafting legal instruments recognizing the rights of nature. And he's also a co-lead editor of an Earth Law textbook, which is called Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law. Awesome. I'll put the rest in the chat. So thank you, Grant, for joining us.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. And I see the recording is on, so that's good for the millions of viewers to come. So thanks for the introduction. I don't like to talk for too long generally, but I'll give you a little bit of background of who I am and what I do and what I'm up to in the Southwest, but also globally. So as background, I'm a lawyer. I went to Lewis and Clark Law School out there in Oregon, and my mission ever since I entered the environmental space, about 20 years ago now, is to shatter this false divide between humans and nature with the understanding that humans are one small part of nature, not separate from it. And, wondering what would the law look like if it reflected that reality. Currently, the law reflects a very different and false reality, and the law is basically premised on the idea that humans have rights, humans are separate and superior to nature, that human interests alone should be the overarching goal of our society. And what about nature? Well, nature under the law is typically treated as property or a resource, something that we exploit, that's a cog in our economic machine, and it lacks any rights or voice of its own in our legal system. And when you look to the causes of environmental challenges, both here and globally, you can point to so many things, and there's you can point to the corporate bad actors, you can point to our greed, you can point to consumerism, You can point to extractivism, colonialism, all these things. Um, our basic premise is that yes, those are all true, and one of the fundamental solutions to all these things is just to give nature a voice in our legal system, to consider its own intrinsic value and interests alongside our human interests, and to have it be part of this complex, large social political conversation we're having amongst ourselves as humans, but which largely excludes nature. And just to point out what I'm talking about, folks here probably know that we have a lot of environmental laws, which are really helpful, and the Endangered Species Act and Clean Water Act and so forth. But did you know that if you want to, sue under one of those laws, it doesn't actually matter if ecosystems themselves were harmed. That's actually almost irrelevant in the decision as to whether you can apply those laws. What matters is, was a human interest impacted? So, if you want to sue under an endangered species law or clean water law or air pollution law, the first question that comes up in court is, do you have a right to be here in court? It's called standing. And the determination there is, was a human interest harmed? So just to say that our environmental laws, which I love, which are so helpful and which kind of hold the line, it's really, it's all about humans. But this is kind of beginning to change. And let me just to break up the presentation. Let me pull up a slide if you don't mind giving me sharing abilities. It looks like I already have it. This is beginning to change, ... cliffhanger. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, you're going to see all my tabs for a second, so don't be horrified. Okay, this is starting to change, ... And the work of Earth Law Center is to secure rights for nature and future generations of all species. We basically exist because of this dream that we can align human laws with nature's own laws. I think currently we're trying to force nature's laws to align with our own, but we've been rudely awakened to the fact that that doesn't work. And just to, I mentioned some of this stuff a second ago, but just to emphasize kind of what we're talking about, the current legal system versus what we call ecocentric law or earth law. And one thing I want to point out is that under the current laws, kind of the goal of most of our laws is to have less degradation. It's a negative goal. A lot of our environmental laws are what I call emergency room laws, like endangered species laws that don't do anything until a species is already on the verge of collapse. But what if instead the goal of our legal system was to not just prevent extinction, but to ensure thriving species and the well-being of ecosystems and so forth? And the other thing that I think is really important is that, and I talked about this, but just to get more specific, nature has no voice in our legal system. But what if nature had a legal guardian that spoke for it? What if nature had a branch of government? There was just a great podcast about proposing the idea of a tree branch, which would be the branch for trees or species or plants. What if nature had a say, a stake, rights, a board seat? This is something we've worked on. What if nature had justice, for itself, apart from its utility to humans? That's what we work on all over the world. And there's different ways this is manifesting. One is the idea of nature having its own rights. It's called the rights of nature. We also work with a lot of indigenous partners to support indigenous legalities. The Eurocentric laws that we've brought, that colonized, within colonized places have covered up or limited through affronts on sovereignty a lot of the indigenous legalities that since time immemorial did promote living in harmony with nature. And so we do work with indigenous partners to support their rights and sovereignty and their rights to assert indigenous legalities outside of the confines of rights. We also work on the rights of future generations, the idea that people not born today should have some sort of right to exist or to a healthy climate and so forth. We work on the voice of nature, giving nature a voice in the legal system in some way or manner. And then another example is we work on ecocide, which is a proposed crime at the International Criminal Court to make it an international crime when you destroy ecosystems in some large, wide scale manner. It actually is a crime already, but only in a wartime context. So if you destroy a rainforest, let's say, using chemicals as a means of warfare, hint this arose as a thing after the Vietnam War, you might be charged with ecocide, but it's not a crime in peacetime. If you destroy the climate or an entire forest, the Amazon rainforest, let's say, in peacetime, that's currently not an international crime, but a lot of people think it should be. And then just to say who we are as Earth Law Center, and then I'll go back to talk about some local stuff. We work in over 40 countries, including all continents. We work in different bioregions of the world, and around here we work in the Southwest, U.S. Southwest and Pacific Northwest, but we also work throughout Latin America and in the southern part of Africa and many other places. We work with national governments. We helped Panama recently pass a new national law, or helped them write it, a new national law on the rights of nature, working with the Leatherback Project and other partners there. We work with sovereign indigenous peoples and also local communities that are interested in what it means to give a voice to nature in their local community. And we've had a lot of success, especially the last 5 years. We're a team of about 15 all over the world. But my favorite thing is that we are headquartered here in, let's end here. We're headquartered here in Durango, Colorado, right downtown across from the train station. And we've got 3 of our staff here, plus all of our interns come into town in Durango, and a lot of them will spend summers here coming up soon. And then this week, actually, next week, we have a whole program for retired or semi-retired lawyers to help us advance Earth law concepts, which is really fun because some of them have expertise in things like family law. And wow, what can we learn from family law? Well, there's this whole concept of the best interest of the child in family law. What's in the child's best interest? How do you figure that out? How did that determine different legal proceedings? And what if we applied that to nature? What's in the best interest of nature is a concept we can learn from looking at family law. Similarly, corporate law. Someone with corporate law expertise can help us figure out how to give nature a voice in corporations. Give it a board seat is something that we've done in the past, or make nature a shareholder is something Patagonia has done. So this week, the next 2 weeks, look out for our Earth Law Fellows of retired and semi-retired lawyers in town. They're all here in the office down the hall right now, working on a slate of projects that we're going to leverage their expertise to advance. So let me close this and tell you a little more about Durango. Yeah, we're right downtown, and as you saw, we're definitely a global institution. We work all over the world, but my true love is the Southwest here in Durango. And so, as I develop this expertise and lead this growing team that's helping pass and enforce this new wave of ecocentric laws, and always in the back of my head is what's going to be my love letter to Durango and to La Plata County. And I'm thinking about that all the time. So I guess let me just end with a couple of thoughts and then open up any questions we might have. At the local and county level, there's been a long history of rights and nature work happening and ecocentric law work happening. Some was a little aggressive in the early days where some folks were like, well, let's give nature rights and stick it to the polluters, and corporations don't have rights, and let's take this to the courts. And it it inspired a lot of people, but was a little aggressive maybe. And as I mentioned, in other countries, in Latin America especially, the idea of nature having rights and a voice and guardianship is just bubbling up everywhere. It's bread and butter law. I'd be surprised actually if there wasn't a treaty in Latin America in the next 10 years all about the rights of nature. And in fact, in over 40 countries worldwide, there's rights of nature laws at some level of government, and quite a few national. Someone in Spain helped secure legal rights for a saltwater lagoon called Mar Menor and just won the Goldman Environmental Prize for that work, which is basically the Nobel Peace Prize of environmentalism. So all over the world, this idea is advancing rapidly, and in the United Nations, they're lining up behind this idea of harmony with nature. And the Global Biodiversity Treaty, which is a huge, every nation in the world, save two, one of which is the United States, has signed this and implemented this treaty. And now the whole goal of this treaty is harmony with nature by 2050. And the rights of Mother Earth is acknowledged as one tool to achieve that in this treaty. And that was what Campaign Earth Law Center worked on. So all of which is to say all these global, huge institutions and nations and entire continents are lining up behind this idea like, hey, let's give nature a voice. And whether it's rights of nature or incorporating nature into our governance or just reimagining all of our laws around this understanding that we're part of nature, like let's go for that. The US is a little behind some other places. So getting back to the local level stuff, there was an early movement to incorporate this stuff locally through these strong ordinances. They went a little too strong and it didn't do so well on the implementation part. So kind of what we've been pushing for with local governments in the US is, all right, maybe like, local governments can't do what like Panama is doing right now or what Ecuador is doing right now, where there's over 30 court cases and constitutional court cases all the time enforcing the rights of nature. Like we're not quite ready for that. And certainly at the local level, it's hard to do because without going into a bunch of nerdy legal stuff, because um, at the local level, you're still expected to follow state and federal law. You have to follow the higher levels of government, and nature is property. And if you have a permit to exploit nature from state and local and federal governments, there's not much a local government can do to stop that. Same issue with like gun rights. Local governments have tried to restrict gun ownership in some ways, and the courts said sorry, it's like it's a constitutional right, and you have to do what the federal government says and so forth. And so that kind of issue has manifested here. So the approach we take in the local county type stuff is to say, well, let's incorporate this ethic of nature having rights and nature having a voice into local and county government, but not do it in a way where you're going to like end up in litigation against, a mining company and someone using water from the river or whatever. We're not quite ready for that because the state and federal legislation hasn't caught up. But what if we incorporate this as an ethic into local communities? And then also, this is the one I'm really excited about. What if we give nature a voice in some way? And we actually worked with the first town to appoint guardians of a watershed into their local government. That was the town of Nederland who did that. So there's two people who speak legally as the Boulder Creek River and watershed in Nederland, just like a child might have a legal guardian. They are its legal guardians. And you can do that without having to get into like suing on behalf of the watershed or get into like legal standing in the courtroom. Like let's just give nature a voice and learn from it. It's the same approach we're taking in boardrooms where we worked with Faith in Nature to put nature on a board of directors. It's just this idea that if nature is a member of society, of our political system, we can represent it somehow. And you can do that without like getting into this like battle over conflicting rights and so forth. Although in Netherlands, they're going to vote tonight to repeal potentially their rights of nature resolutions there, which is too bad because they've decided they want to build a new dam and reservoir, and they're a little worried that if rights of nature is recognized, that could somehow get in the way. I've reassured them we worked on this initiative to make it really friendly and like we're not trying to go to court. It's just like give the watershed a voice and listen to what it says as part of the community fabric. But anyway, if you have any friends in Netherlands, you could tell them to tune in tonight or submit a letter tonight, telling them you think that 4 months after giving the watershed a voice, which has been reported all over the world, and the United Nations is heralded, and all these things that maybe they shouldn't repeal it and listen to what the watershed has to say. But anyway, so there are some cool tools like this at the local level, and I'd be really excited to explore them in La Plata County and hear what people have to say. I have a special expertise in rivers, and what if the Animas River had a voice? What would it say in local government? And lastly, I feel like I say lastly over a period of like 15 minutes, and then I finally say lastly. Lastly, we've been working a lot with students at Fort Lewis College and visiting classrooms and lecturing in classrooms there. And there's a lot of interest amongst young people in this space. And in fact, in Panama, I mentioned we did a national rights of nature law. It was a 26-year-old lawmaker named Juan Diego Vasquez Gutierrez, 26-year-old lawmaker who ushered in their national rights of nature law there. And youth is so passionate about this space, and schools are beginning to teach students about this idea of aligning our legal systems with nature as a new status quo. We did a 2-day conference at George Washington University Law School. This topic is being taught at Barry Law School, at NYU Law, at Harvard has clinics that are working on the rights of animals and species and submitting briefs on these topics. Harvard Law School, I mean, the most powerful institution in the world, really, in many ways. And so, young people are learning about this as the new normal. And that includes at Fort Lewis College, where a lot of students, you can't speak for everyone, but a lot of students have a lot of interest in the space, whether it's rights of nature or other innovations to reimagine law to include nature. And, I've worked with probably 10 students as interns, and there's a lot of interest in students in the idea of, what if students helped give nature a voice in Durango? And maybe that could even be part of a class or a practicum. And we've worked with a professor at Fort Lewis, kind of exploring that idea a little bit too. So I think this is something that could excite current students and bring more students to town who want to work with Earth Law Center or other like-minded folks at Fort Lewis College to explore some of these ideas as well. So I hope that becomes part of the picture. So with that, I guess I'd welcome any thoughts or comments or questions. And I don't have any specific proposals for La Plata County at the moment, but I am interested in doing something that could really unite the community as an exciting proposal at some point in the future.
That's awesome. I'm just thinking of our electric co-op, which I'm trying to make a comment right now, but our electric co-op is trying to get a solar field, right? So if the sun was saying, I'm here, use this, it would be interesting to have students advocate for using the energy of the wind and solar that they're ready to help us out here on this planet. I mean, that's just another thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the question of where we get our energy from is interesting. And definitely we should have a voice in deciding that. I do a lot of work on rivers too, and I know I have a strong interest in what is classified as renewable energy. I mean, should hydro be renewable, or does it permanently destroy ecosystems and that's therefore not renewable? Or does the water dry up during mega droughts and that's therefore not renewable? So I think it's definitely interesting and good to push for solar and wind, but there's some trade-offs in all cases. But yeah, I mean, I think, and then what does nature have to say about it? What's the Animas River or the ecosystems? What do they think about our energy choices? And should they have a say in that or not? Because it's our property. I mean, that's kind of a question we're talking about. I see a question in the chat here, and then a hand raised from Clyde. I'm not the moderator. Should I get to Kirby or to Clyde?
Go ahead, Kirby.
Kirby's pointing to Clyde.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering how the Earth Law Center connects with San Juan Citizens Alliance, and we've got an Animas River Keeper. And I believe there's other river keepers in other drainages. I've always thought the river keeper was some sort of a voice for the river. Is that working well, or are there other issues that I'm not seeing here?
Yeah, thanks. And sorry, there's an intruder certainly here to attack me that my dog's barking at. That's just my friendly neighbor. But if you hear my dog in the background, that's what's going on.
That's all right.
So yeah, and this, yeah, there's your more obedient cat. That's a good question, and also interfaces with what Kirby wrote in here about who gets to speak for nature. So we do work with a lot of the water keepers, and I've presented to their national base. One of our big flagship partners is the group Save the Colorado, which recently renamed itself to Save the World's Rivers. And we're basically working on rights of rivers and watersheds, and have worked as close to here as in Ridgeway, Colorado, where we worked on a local resolution on the rights of the Uncompahgre River and watershed. In terms of the local groups, yeah, I know the folks over at San Juan Citizens Alliance, and I know the fairly new Animas Riverkeeper. And in terms of how do we give a formal voice to the river, what they do is in many ways serve as a civil society voice and guardian and defender of the rivers through through a nonprofit organization, and really valuable work. I mean, the water keepers have long been one of our biggest partners everywhere we work. And I think that kind of the evolution or the related but slightly different thing that we want to do is give the river a formal voice in government that's recognized as having some sort of procedural right to, if nothing else, have its say and as legally the river. So not a nonprofit, but something that's legally recognized as the river having its own agency. Now, are there water keepers that would be interested in evolving their role as a nonprofit defender of a river into being part of speaking legally in government as legally as a river, not for the river, but as the river? I think so, and that would I can't speak for every particular water keeper or nonprofit, but and this gets to Kirby's question, when you figure out who speaks for an ecosystem, like who has the right to speak for a river or an ecosystem of any type, certainly there's some level of human hubris to say that we even can. My dog's barking here. I don't know what my dog wants, and she's my best friend. And can I speak for her accurately? And can I even more so speak for a river? In terms of who you would appoint, we actually have guidelines on this, but someone who has a cultural, a lifelong connection with a certain ecosystem, someone who has long lived within an ecosystem and understands it and has a personal connection to it, I think is important. Someone with, people with training in science, people with training in ecocentric law, like myself, people who understand the shortcomings of environmental laws, certainly. Indigenous peoples with a close connection to an ecosystem in some cases have been appointed as guardians. That was the case with the Atrato River in Colombia, where indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities who culturally considered themselves as being inseparable from the river, they were the river, were appointed as guardians. Professors, youth, students who believe in this stuff, and students have long been innovators. And now you've noticed I've just listed off like 10 different entities. And I actually think that, guardianship bodies that have a diverse representation of different interests and who collectively speak on behalf of an ecosystem is a really exciting way to do this sort of thing. And that's what's happened in some places.
So how do you take the next step and gain standing in the court on an issue? If you have a group of, tribes and environmental and legal, and how do we move from where we are today to a spokesman from this group that has standing in court?
Right. So the standing thing is interesting. I'm really interested in the short term to have let's say, a procedural right for these entities to have their voice being heard and to, receive information about harms, to, report to, let's say, a city council about, how are the rights of the river or the ecosystem being considered on specific policy issues. And that's kind of like an ombudsperson type role where you're receiving information and speaking. And an ombudsperson type role is pretty common in places for, let's say, future generations. That's something that has existed in Hungary for a long time. There's an ombudsperson for future generations, and I'm really interested in that type of role because it's lower stakes. It's not going to result in litigation. There's not going to be like a big fight that's expensive. And like, let's just get in the habit of giving nature a voice and learning from that. In terms of like standing in a court, there are a lot of countries that have taken this idea of nature having a voice and rights to the courts, and nature's represented in the courts. Just a couple of weeks ago, we worked on a case in Peru where rights were given to the Marañón River. It's a beautiful river that flows from the peaks of the Andes into the heart of the Amazon, and it's the major tributary to the Amazon River. And the courts have committed to appointing indigenous women river defenders as one of the main guardians of the river. And they have standing in court. They can enter into contracts, they can sue. I think we're not quite ready for that level in the United States yet. And I think when we get there, it's going to require probably at least state support, if not federal support. Otherwise, you just run into too many preemption issues, because these legal systems, regulatory systems, do define nature as just a resource and property without rights. But once you get to that point with state support, I think you could see, an ecosystem having some sort of, standing or be able to go to the courts. And people worry about that. They're like, oh, is this going to be like endless litigation on nature? And what about my property rights? And I have thought that through a lot. And maybe I'll just mention those two quick points and take more questions. We do already have a human right to a healthy environment in some state constitutions. Like in Montana, there was a recent case held v. Montana. And it hasn't been like, thousands of lawsuits from human environmental rights or rights of future generations and flooding the courts. It's been a small handful of, landmark type court cases. In this case, where, young persons went to court, and this is through the Our Children's Trust group. Young persons went to court about their right to a healthful environment and climate to address a specific state policy issue. And I think we'll see that kind of be the same for this, where it'd be, a lesser amount of kind of big decisions. On the like, well, we own nature. What about our property rights and so forth? I think there's actually a lot of interesting and not that difficult ways to deal with that. And the main one that I think is good is just to, maintain our property rights for sure. Like maybe you want to not have your neighbor like coming over to your house when they're not invited. And hey, I have a property right. I can exclude you. That's one of the bundle of sticks. And, you need to build a place to live, and that's understandable. We have a right to home and so forth. But to instill a reciprocal duty to the land. And, that might just say that humans, yeah, we have a right to home and to life and to house. But what if we have a duty to give back to the land as well? And that might just be very practical things like, promoting migration corridors in communities, or, planting, biodiverse, drought tolerant, let's say around here, drought tolerant species where we live, and, living respectfully in the watersheds and ecosystems in which we live. And, that can be called reciprocity, and is something that's, we practice amongst each other. And so I think things like that can be kind of entry points into this idea of living in harmony with nature through new legal innovation in a way where it's not going to just be like adversarial and court cases and you're taking my property type of thing. There's ways we can do this gently and thoughtfully, and all benefit from it.
There's an example of I think that has been formed here by the Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, the CFLRP. I can't remember what the acronym, but it's a collaborative process, including the three what do you call them? Well, the three national forests, the three regions: Dolores, Four Rivers Collaborative, and the San Juan. And there's collaboratives going down into New Mexico also for. It started as fire mitigation and legislation, and it's funded at roughly $3 million a year for 10 years. And one of the outcomes is a much more thoughtful approach to wildlife and ancestral and aquatic resources. And there's committees that are working on this. There is also a state effort. Phil Weiser is going to be in town May 9th from 3 to 5 at the Durango Public Library. We're going to be talking about with a group of people concerned about reclaiming the Animas River from the Bonita Peaks mine spill, Gold King mine. And they're looking for projects to do. I think it's 7 million over 2 years, or 14 million over 2 years, 7 million a year, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but that there's a group forming up trying to do something, and they're grappling for things to do and looking to the environmentalists. And there's quite a few representatives on this collaborative group. So I think that's going to be interesting. So I'll be quiet and
Thanks, Clyde. And yeah, I mean, there's such great environmental groups in La Plata County, and we mentioned a couple of them before, San Juan Citizens Alliance and the Animas River Keepers, and they're doing amazing work and really representing the environment in those collectives. And I think if we can also figure out ways to represent nature directly, that would be exciting and could show some proof of concept. And I'm always looking for kind of low stakes ways to do that and just to learn from it. But interesting to know about all those groups and the local protections happening. I see a couple of things in the chat which are interesting. Nature having a seat on the Supreme Court, that would be fun. I would say that. I mean, a partner of ours, it's this group Voice for Nature. Their dream has always been to have a seat for nature at the United Nations. I mean, why not? And there's actually unceded territory, terra nullius, that no nation owns, that could be like delegated as the actual territory that's represented with a seat at the United Nations. And then, so yeah, why not the SCOTUS? I think that would be fun. There actually was the Democratic National Committee during Biden's first run at an environmental working group, a climate and environment working group, and they proposed in their platform a task force on the rights of nature at the federal level. And that was in the final work plan of this committee. It was not specifically adopted in Biden's like final platform, but it was in that committee platform. So check that out too. I think the idea of just like having a discussion about it is fun too. Like let's have a community dialogue about it and see what people say, and all sorts of fun things come out. And then Dick asked about the biodiversity treaty. The U.S. signed it, but it wasn't ratified by Congress. It has to be ratified to go into effect. So I think Clinton's signature is on it or something, but is not in operation.
Wow. Dick White, have you met Grant?
I have not.
Grant, you need to know Dick White. He's an environmental champion in this town.
Oh, well,
Enduring Green Globe, is that your blog now, Dick?
Yes.
Excellent. So Grant, he put that in the chat, and that's the source of this article, The 10 Commandments, which is always great work, Dick.
that's
Thanks.
great. Yeah. Great to be in touch, Dick, and I'd love to learn more. I think Karen earlier said should we mention your upcoming event? We are having a little event on Thursday this week, that limited space. We got a couple spots left if anyone's interested. There's a LinkedIn post about it. It's at Four Leaves Winery, and it's gonna have delicious food from RGP Wraps and also Nini's. And if anyone's interested, you can sign up there at 6 to 8 p.m. The LinkedIn post promises a sign unveiling. It may or may not arrive by Thursday, lots of drama, but if there's not a sign unveiling, there'll be something equally exciting happening. So folks can sign up if they're interested.
Okay, what do you call the event so I can put it out there?
It's the annual Earth Law Gala, and or Gala or Gala. I've learned they're all three correct pronunciations.
And the date and time.
It's Thursday at 6 to 8.
Yeah, free $20 recommended donation, and you get a glass of wine, but otherwise it's free besides the recommended donation. And we are going to have a sign on Main Avenue, whether it's Thursday or a week or so after that. So as I said, we're kind of by Nini's and the train station, so you can walk by and know who we are now.
All righty. Oh, you put something in here. Okay, cool. All right. You see the chat, Kirby? Okay, well, Does anyone else have any other questions? Or just comments about all this? You can just chime in.
I'd follow up my earlier question with asking who is the other country that has not signed the biodiversity treaty?
I'm not even sure if they're legally a country or a nation. It's the Holy See. It's like it's the Vatican.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure why they didn't. Maybe I mean, it's possible they even signed it now because I know the current Pope is like really, at least that's what I recall. I haven't looked at that factoid for like 10 years, but that's what popped into my mind, I'm pretty sure. But the current Pope is very pro-environment. And actually in Laudato Si, the environmental encyclical talks a lot about the fact that humans, should not consider nature as something that we have dominion over per se, but rather we have a duty to be stewards of the land. And there are actually lots of writings and interpretations of religious texts, including the Bible and others, kind of explaining how you can read them to understand humans have a duty to be stewards of the planet. And the Laudato Si, and there's a follow-up document as well, really lean into that.
Hmm.
Oh, the expanding frontiers. That's fun. So, this movement kind of started as like nature having rights and standing, and it was kind of very basic, but now there's all this innovation to just kind of insert nature into the core of the legal system and all sorts of other legal spaces. So, and just to name a few off the top of my head, in family law, there's just a law in British Columbia that says dogs are to be considered not as property as they always were and were in most places, but as a member of the family when there's, when a couple splits up. And that's just like different. And dogs are actually oftentimes the trailblazers in this space because there's things like pet trusts. Can pets be a beneficiary of a trust? Well, normally only humans can be beneficiaries, but we've kind of like blurred the line when it comes to pets. So go pets for being trailblazers in Earth law. Some other just random innovations are, IP law. There's, Spotify now has a section where you can like designate royalties to nature when there's nature sounds, like maybe nature should be able to hold intellectual property is another example. There could even be, representation of nature in democratic processes, which could be a guardian, like voting on something, or there could be more straightforward ways for nature to vote on something. Sometimes it's pretty obvious what it would say, but other time, you can imagine a bee every time it's like flying around and gets to another place where it pollinates. That's like a vote for you, like yes, let's like keep this here. And when it gets to, when it's like skunked, it's a vote for like, well, let's add some more plants that I can pollinate on in this section. There's all sorts of stuff like that. One other thing I'll mention is that at the United Nations, there's a good chance there'll be a special envoy for future generations soon. And that's just basically a body at the UN that speaks for the voiceless, which are future generations. And I think that'll open the door for nature to have a special envoy or other representation as well. So there's actually countless innovations. When I got into this space 10 years ago, it was a lot of deaf ears and crickets and that sort of thing. The last 4 years, it's just been an explosion in this space and just thousands of people interested in it. We've housed hundreds of interns here who are all just amazing, talented people. So I guess just to say that there is a lot happening in this space, and I hope the community is interested and stays engaged. And our job at Earth Law Center is not necessarily to say which way is right or wrong. If you want to give nature a voice, some people say rights of nature sucks, and some say it's great, and some say there's other ways we can do this. But we have legal expertise to provide guidance and whatever is of interest to the community.
I'd like to say thank you very much, Grant. This is very interesting, and I am ashamed that I didn't know you were around before I met you a couple months ago. So
Because we haven't got that sign on Main Avenue yet, but yeah. Thanks for coming out. And how can we participate? Yeah, sign up for our newsletter. It's online, or follow me on LinkedIn. I post all the local stuff in LinkedIn. If you want to come to this party on Thursday, come on out. If not, then we'll have another one in not too long. Clyde, has anyone done this into zoning or land use? No. But I mentioned I have the 10 lawyers here this week doing the fellowship, and next week, some of them are interested in looking into that idea of what does it mean to have a reciprocal duty to the land in a way where people can get behind, because people are concerned about property rights and property values, and that's totally fair. I understand that. And I think if you can prove, like through a gentle pilot project, that like we can give back to the land in a way that actually is good for everyone, and it doesn't change your day-to-day life but enhances the community of life in which we live. If we can prove that, including through zoning, I think that would be pretty exciting and get a lot more people interested in this space. So thanks for asking that.
Concepts are very similar to Native American culture and beliefs.
A lot of them are, and are inspired by that. And tribal nations have been a leader in the rights of nature space. The Ho-Chunk Nation, the Navajo actually has rights of Mother Earth and Father Sky in a document representing their customary beliefs. The Ponca Nation, the Nez Perce, and it goes on and on. Other tribal nations are more interested in we want our full sovereignty, and then we'd like to assert our traditional legalities that do have a lot of similarities but aren't called rights of nature per se. And but certainly, I mean, the original teachings are all there.
Mm.
Nature Conservancy or other major groups. I often present to the large environmental groups like the Sierra Club, and I can't remember if I've presented to the Nature Conservancy, but certainly the National Sierra Club. Fine Earth has an interest. They're really big in Europe and are in the U.S. Now in LA as well. The Center for Biological Diversity is pretty large. They've signed on and participated in some of our briefs in Latin America specifically. The water keepers, many of them are interested in this space and have participated. I presented to their national collective, but individually they've at least shown interest. So some have, some haven't. It's a little, they're kind of balancing, this careful, like middle of the ground work where they're trying to bridge so many stakeholders that maybe it's not quite right for them to dip their toes into this space for the work that they're doing and the important role that they're serving. But I think more and more as they see the global scope of the work happening here, there's more interest in at least exploring the idea.
Cool. Your gala on Thursday is at Four Leaves Winery.
That's right.
Kirby just put an event in that I have. If you scroll way up, I put a whole bunch of events in the chat for, I hope, everybody to copy and paste. And you can join a couple mailing lists up there. And then Kirby added this Saturday, our candidates are going to be all at Esoterra Cider Works. Have you been there, Grant? It's
yeah.
right at the corner of
Couple
College
down.
and Main.
About 100 feet from me right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really great owner, Elizabeth. I forgot her last name. Philbrick, Philbrick. So the local candidates will be there, and if you or one of your interns wants to go by and start raising up these, here's something you could be interested in, if there's anything for them to talk about while they're going around the state.
Oh yeah, I think I'll definitely try to stop by. And for the cidery itself and other businesses in town, I'm hoping to also find someone who wants to put nature on their board of directors or that sort of thing. And I'm also thinking a lot about how this could help Durango tourism. People who are like, oh, Durango, that's the place that's doing these great innovations to give nature a voice. Like, let's go. They could do a tour and it'd be a fun thing. So all of this is rooted in how it helps the community for sure. But yeah, good. I'll try to stop by on the 11th. Good to know those candidates are in town. And
Elizabeth, the owner, you should talk to her about that. She would probably definitely do that.
Oh boy. All right. Elizabeth, if you're listening, let's talk.
There's I imagine she would be one of the ones who would like to have that beginning of that conversation of putting someone on their board.
Yeah.
And it seems like we do a lot of, getting around for the Dems and stuff. And everybody I find that is at Fort Lewis College, when you say, well, what are you studying? It's environmental studies, environmental science. It just seems like those are who come to our events anyway. So do you go up to Fort Lewis?
Oh yeah, a lot. That's honestly one of my favorite things about this town is the college there. The students are just so smart and with it and forward thinking and
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
cool.
You mentioned the Durango tourism and you should get to know Waylon Ryan, who is their appointed staff member to work on sustainability issues. He is usually a presenter, or if he's also a board member at SASCO, and usually is the MC at Green Drinks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sure I've met Waylon then, so cool. I will. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, if we're making announcements. I've got office hours Thursday the 16th from 3 to 5 at the Smiley Building. So any topic anybody wants to bring, I'm there.
Great. Thanks, Clay.
Do I have to pay for my plugs here? Karen,
Smiley,
Smiley,
Kirby's typing away.
3 to 5 on the 16th.
Kathleen Adams wanted to know when Phil Weiser's in town. I think you said this Thursday, the 9th,
This Thursday. Yeah.
from 3 to 5 at the library, Kathleen.
Yes.
All these good things happening. Kirby and I are leaving for a graduation tomorrow in Austin, Texas, and we'll be warm. We'll be warmer than you guys in the freezing cold out there. We'll be
Good
really.
time to visit Austin.
Hmm?
The spring is a good time to visit Austin. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, it's
Don't
only
go
in
in
the
August.
high 80s there.
Yeah, don't go in August.
So we're with you guys in spirit, and it'd be wonderful to be at the event, all these different events, but we won't be home till Tuesday, so. And I put Bethia, I outed you. You're a lawyer with Crane and Tejada here in the town, so that Grant could know you. Dick, were you a lawyer?
No, no, I was an astronomy professor.
That's right. So, hey, space is the next frontier. A voice for space. And believe me, my background's aviation, and they are trying to pollute space with all sorts of stuff up there. So people don't think about it, but there's a lot going on in space.
Yeah. Orbital space is already pretty polluted. They're increasingly worried about debris running into other satellites, and orbital speeds are so big that even a small difference, a penny-sized fragment can puncture a satellite.
Yeah, the Kessler syndrome. Have you ever looked that up, Dick? That's
No.
what that means. That's the Kessler syndrome.
That's the good.
All righty. I think we'll wrap it up. I really want to thank everyone for hanging in there at the beginning of this because we started a little late. And I want to thank Grant for all this great information and inspiration for us to start thinking of ways we can protect the Earth and space. And if everybody wants to take a moment to do the chat, to click on things, but we'll let Grant go. And thank you so much.
Thank
We'll
you. Great to be here.
seeing you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.